Hey guys, tonight we begin with a story set in the heart of medieval intrigue, a tale of desire, danger, and scandal whispered behind castle walls. It is the story of the concubine's poisoned kiss, where passion and betrayal meet under the flickering torchlight of a king's chamber. Tonight, we wander through secrets that once swayed thrones, where love was laced with power, and even a single kiss might mean life or death. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now let's begin. Imagine with me a vast medieval castle in the heart of Europe, perhaps in France during the reign of Charles VI, or in England under the shadow of Richard II. The walls are high and cold, built not only for protection but to inspire awe and fear. Within those walls, the nobility lived lives of splendor, but also of vice. Because behind every feast, every procession, every hymn sung in the chapel, there was a scandal, waiting quietly, waiting patiently to be discovered. Our story centers not on knights in shining armor, nor on queens ruling with grace. No, tonight we follow the softer footsteps. Those of the concubine. She is not officially a wife, nor always named in public chronicles, yet she is present in every court. She moves like a shadow, and yet she holds power. For in medieval Europe, kings were often surrounded by mistresses and concubines. Their influence whispered through lips sweeter than wine, their secrets more dangerous than any sword. And this concubine carries with her not only the warmth of beauty, but the sting of something darker. Poison, now. Poison in the Middle Ages was both feared and strangely admired. Chroniclers whispered that queens and mistresses alike sometimes kept small pouches of powders, vials of dark tinctures hidden inside jeweled boxes. Belladonna, known as deadly nightshade, was one such weapon. And strangely, it was also a beauty aid. Women would drop it into their eyes to dilate their pupils, believing it made them more alluring. Imagine that beauty and death from the very same flower. So when we talk of a poisoned kiss, we are not only speaking in metaphor. There were whispers of women, favored by kings, who smeared their lips with sweetened tinctures of belladonna, of hemlock, or of aconite, each deadly in its own subtle way. A single kiss could weaken a rival. A gentle embrace could mean the slow decline of a queen or a nobleman. History tells us that court intrigues were often decided not only on battlefields, but in bedrooms. Picture this now, a dimly lit chamber within the castle. Heavy curtains block the chill of the night, though a faint draught moves through the cracks in the stone. A fire glows low in the hearth, its embers crackling softly, filling the room with the scent of resinous pine. There, reclining on a velvet couch, sits the concubine. She is draped in silks imported from the East, her hair perfumed with oils, her lips shimmering with a sheen of honeyed wine. The perverted king, known not for his wisdom but for his insatiable appetites, enters the chamber. He does not come alone. Around him trail servants, guards, and sometimes even members of the clergy, who turn blind eyes to his indulgences. For though the church condemned lust, many bishops themselves were not innocent keeping mistresses. Siring children and enjoying the same pleasures they publicly denounced. Such hypocrisy was common, and it allowed the concubine to move through these halls with more freedom than one might expect. Now, in some courts, mistresses were celebrated openly. In France, King Charles VII kept Agnes Sorel, who was so beloved, she was called the first official mistress. She wore gowns that revealed more than they concealed, scandalizing the nobility, and yet her influence on the king was undeniable. In England, Edward IV was known for his many mistresses, some of whom were rumored to shape political decisions. And in smaller kingdoms, far from the chronicler's quills, the stories were even more scandalous. Our concubine is drawn from this world, a composite of rumor and fact, She is beautiful, but her beauty is dangerous. She has learned that the power of a woman in her position is not in armies, nor in riches, but in whispers, in secrets, and sometimes in the kiss that lingers too long. Imagine the scene more closely. The chamber is quiet, save for the sound of the fire and the faint rush of wind outside. The concubine holds a goblet of wine, rich with spiced cinnamon, clove, and a touch of honey. She offers it not first to the king, but to herself. She dips her lips upon the rim, leaving a faint trace of gloss. Then she passes the goblet forward. The king drinks. His eyes, glazed from excess wine and desire, do not notice the faint bitterness masked beneath the sweetness. It was not uncommon for medieval rulers to fear poisoning. Kings and lords employed tasters whose sole purpose was to sip their food before they did. Yet sometimes it was not the food at all, but the kiss, the touch, the embrace that carried the danger. And so the legend of the concubine's poisoned kiss takes root. Was it true? Did such women exist? Chroniclers often hint, but rarely confirm. Yet in the margins of medieval manuscripts, in the letters between abbots and nobles, in the hushed gossip of servants, the story repeats itself, scandalous, impossible to prove, yet impossible to ignore. Tonight, as you listen, I want you to imagine this not only as a tale of desire and danger, but as a portrait of an age where kings fell not only by the sword, but by their indulgences, where concubines and mistresses walked the line between luxury and peril, where poison was both perfume and weapon, and where a single kiss could change the fate of an entire realm. So let us wander deeper into her world, into her chamber, into her secrets. And as we go, you may find yourself more relaxed, lulled by the rhythm of history's whispers. For this is no fairy tale, it is a mirror held up to the scandalous shadows of the medieval court. The chamber door shuts with a heavy groan of wood and iron. The guards remain outside, their armor clinking faintly as they take their positions. Inside, only the firelight and the shifting shadows keep company with the king and his chosen companion. The concubine bows her head slightly, as was custom. Even in private, the ritual of respect was observed. To look a king directly in the eyes could be bold, sometimes dangerous, and yet she does it, slowly, carefully, with eyes that glimmer not only with submission but with something for she knows the king's habits better than most. She knows he prefers spiced wines over plain roasted meats over stews, and flattery whispered against his ear rather than sung in the hall. She knows he is a man of excess, a man rumored in court not for wisdom, but for what chroniclers dared to call perversions. It was often said of kings in the medieval age that their private chambers were more scandalous than any battlefield. Richard II of England, though less infamous than later monarchs, was whispered to indulge in eccentric tastes, surrounding himself with favorites who enjoyed unusual influence. In France, Charles VI's court was notorious for its feasts and its whispered scandals. Mistresses held sway over politics. These stories trickled down to villagers through gossip carried by traveling bards, half-truths wrapped in song, but enough to stir curiosity and judgment alike. And so our concubine plays her part. She smiles softly, moving with the slow grace of a woman trained to soothe, yet always to intrigue. Adgouze, she has been given jewels, gowns of silk, perfumes from far-off lands, but gifts, she knows, are fleeting. What lasts is control. And in her era, women in her position could not wield swords or command soldiers. Instead, they wielded something far subtler, desire. She pours more wine, the liquid glimmering like garnet in the firelight. The king drinks greedily, his laughter echoing through the chamber. He tells her stories of hunts, of battles, of the fools at court who bend to his will. She listens, nodding at the right moments, touching his hand lightly when his voice rises too loud. She knows when to soothe and when to provoke. This balance is her art, But tonight, she has added something else to her performance, something darker. Upon her lips is not only honey and perfume, but the faint trace of an infusion-crushed leaves of belladonna. Mixed carefully into wine and touched upon her mouth with a brush of silk. Belladonna, the beautiful woman. The name itself feels like poetry. Medieval women sometimes used it in drops to make their pupils widen, believing it made them more alluring. But in greater amounts, it was deadly. It blurred vision, quickened the heart, caused delirium. And in whispers and shadows, it was said to bring about a death that seemed almost like sleep. The concubine's lips glistened faintly in the firelight. She leans closer, her words soft, coaxing the king to forget the troubles of rule, the scheming of nobles, the demands of the clergy. She becomes his entire world, a mistress more powerful in this moment than any council. And as she does, she lets her lips brush his cheek, his jaw, the corner of his mouth each touch laced with the faintest trace of the poison. Outside these walls, villagers live in ignorance of such intrigues. They rise with the sun, toil in fields, bake bread, and sleep under rough blankets. For them, power lies in harvests and the mercy of weather. But here, inside the castle, power takes another form. It is hidden in silken candlelight, in the scandal of forbidden love, in the slow drip of poison on a royal's lips. The king does not notice. He is too consumed by desire, too drunk on wine and the illusion of control. He sees only a concubine devoted to him, yet in truth she is the one steering the night. Her whispers guide his laughter, her glances control his moods, and her poisoned kiss gentle and visible writes his fate. Whispers of such women linger throughout medieval chronicles, though often disguised beneath layers of rumor. Lucretia Borgia, centuries later, would be accused of using poisoned rings and goblets. In France, stories circulated of mistresses who shortened the lives of rivals with subtle powders. Whether these tales were true or merely inventions of jealous enemies hardly mattered. What mattered was that people believed them, and belief itself was power. The concubine leans back slightly, letting the king grow drowsy with wine. She touches the strings of a small harp, plucking soft notes into the stillness of the chamber. Music in medieval courts was both entertainment and seduction, meant to soothe, to enchant, to pass long hours. Her voice, low and husky, begins a song. Not a hymn, not a courtly ballad, but a softer tuned one that speaks of longing, of nights where love and death entwine. The king sighs, lulled by the warmth of the fire and the softness of her voice. His head grows heavy, his eyes clouded not only by drink, but by the creeping touch of the belladonna. He does not yet know what has touched him. He only knows he feels. Strange, heavy, sleepy. His last coherent thought is that she looks more beautiful than ever. Her eyes glowing in the firelight, her lips shining like rubies. And she smiles. For in this age, survival for a concubine is a delicate balance. To be chosen is to be lifted from obscurity, clothed in wealth. But to remain chosen requires cunning. Many mistresses were cast aside when youth faded, or when rivals whispered in the right ears. To secure her place, some gave birth to royal bastards, hoping their children would tie them forever to the throne. Others relied on intrigue, aligning themselves with nobles or clergy, and some used poison. Tonight our concubine has chosen the last path, and as the fire burns low, as the king drifts into restless sleep, she leans down, her lips brushing his ear, and she whispers not words of love, but words of power. Words that only she will remember come morning. The scandal has only just begun. The night stretches on. The fire in the hearth has burned down to glowing embers, their light flickering across the stone walls in restless patterns. The king stirs in his sleep, murmuring words half-formed like fragments of dreams. His breath is uneven, his face flushed, his body heavy with wine, and with something else. The concubine sits beside him, her hand resting lightly on his chest. She can feel the rhythm of his heartbeat, a rhythm that falters now and then, quickening, slowing, never quite steady. Belladonna works subtly, like a shadow moving across the body, unseen but undeniable. She watches him carefully. A woman in her position cannot act recklessly. Every gesture must be measured, every secret carefully hidden. If he dies too soon, suspicion will fall on her. If he dies too late, her plan may crumble. What she needs is not simply his death, but his weakness, his reliance, his surrender. Outside the chamber, the castle sleeps. The courtyards lie silent under the moonlight, their cobblestones glistening with dew. In the great hall, the remains of the feast are still scattered across the table's platters of half-eaten venison. Pitchers of watered wine, trenchers of bread torn by greasy fingers. Servants have withdrawn to their quarters, while the guards pace slowly, their footsteps echoing in the night. But within the walls of this room, history is being shaped, and no one will write of it in the official chronicles. It's not in the ledgers of the clergy, nor in the annals of kings. No, these are the stories that live only in whispers. Whispers of the mistress who controlled her sovereign not with sword or scripture, but with the softness of her kiss. In the morning, the king wakes with a heaviness he cannot explain. His head aches, his vision swims, and his body feels weaker than it should. He blames the wine, perhaps the meat from the feast. But when the concubine leans over him, her touch cool upon his brow, he feels soothed. Your whispers words of comfort, her voice like velvet. Rest, my lord. The world can wait. Stay with me a while longer. And so he does. Day after day, the king grows more dependent. His courtiers whisper of his absence from council meetings, his unusual fatigue. Some wonder if his mind is failing, as madness had run through royal lines before. Others suggest sorcery, for in the medieval mind, illness without cause was often explained as witchcraft. And always the concubine is there. At his side, offering him wine sweetened with honey, kisses soft as silk, touches that both calm and cloud his thoughts. Scandal spreads like smoke through the castle corridors. Servants gossip behind closed doors. They say she has bewitched him. They say she has replaced his queen in his affections. Some whisper that she is no concubine at all, but a witch in human form. For in these times the line between mistress and sorceress was often blurred. In truth, many women accused of witchcraft were simply women who wielded influence in ways the church could not control. A mistress with too much sway might easily be branded dangerous. And yet, the king defends her fiercely, too blinded by desire to see the danger in her presence. The concubine knows this cannot last forever. She knows there are rivals who watch her every move, the queen's ladies, the bishop who despises her, the noblemen who sneer at her low birth. But she also knows something they do not, that the king, for all his power, is now hers. She has felt the change in his body. She has seen the confusion in his eyes, the way he reaches for her hand, as if it alone can steady him. And with each passing night, as she brushes her lips against his, she tightens the invisible chain that binds him. Yet beneath the scandal, there is also something tender. Though she plays her role with calculation, she too is human. She too feels the weight of loneliness, the longing for affection, the ache of uncertainty. And in the quietest hours, when the fire burns low and the castle is silent, she wonders if she has poisoned not only his body, but her own soul. Still she cannot stop, for to stop is to lose everything.
Oh.
And so the legend grows. The king, once proud and loud, now appears pale and distracted. His court begins to fracture, nobles aligning with one faction or another, all the while whispering about the concubine who sits at the center of it all. The queen herself cannot move against her openly, for to accuse without proof would only deepen the scandal. Instead, she waits. She watches. History tells us that in many courts, mistresses were the true power behind the throne. Agnes Sorel, the famous mistress of Charles VII of France, was said to influence matters of state as much as the king's counselors. In Burgundy, Margaret of York was accused of witchcraft simply because her influence was feared. And in Italy, the rumors of the Borgia family's poisonings became legends in their own right. Our concubine is part of this tapestry, a shadow woven into the scandal of the Middle Ages. She knows the risk she runs, but she also knows the reward. One night, as the king drifts again into restless sleep, she sits at the window, gazing out at the moonlit courtyard. The cool night air touches her face, carrying with it the distant sound of an owl. She closes her eyes and listens to the quiet breathing of the king, to the faint crackle of dying embers, to the heartbeat of a world outside that will never know her true story. For history rarely remembers the concubines, the mistresses, the prostitutes who shaped the fates of kings. Now their shadows are there in every rumor, in every scandal, in every poisoned kiss. And as the concubine leans back into the shadows, her lips curving into the faintest smile, she knows one truth above all others. That power in this world belongs not always to the strongest, nor to the noblest, but to the one who learns how to whisper sweetly. While hiding the sting of poison beneath the kiss, the king, once loud and insatiable, begins to vanish from public view. No longer does he ride out proudly in hunts, nor host long feasts that filled the hall with drunken laughter. Instead, he spends his hours behind curtains drawn against the sun, his body weak, his eyes glazed. Always, the concubine is with him. At first, the courtiers find it amusing, another tale to whisper in shadowed corners. The king is bewitched, they murmur. The king has been drained by his mistress, some laugh, shaking their heads at the thought that a woman of no noble blood could hold such sway. But laughter in the Middle Ages was often a mask for fear. Beneath it, anxiety grows. The queen does not laugh. She walks the halls in silence, her veil trailing across the cold stones, her hands clasped in prayer. Outwardly, she remains composed, but her ladies know better. They hear the tension in her breath, the way her rosary beads click faster as she whispers petitions to saints. To accuse the concubine openly would risk humiliation. To act without proof could make the scandal worse. And so she waits, her anger buried like a hot coal beneath ashes. The church too begins to stir. Bishops remind the king of his sacred duties, of the sin of lust, of the need for penance. But their words fall upon dulled ears. How can he think of sin when his every thought is clouded by the concubine's presence? Her lips, her voice, her touch, they linger on him longer than Scripture ever could. In the streets of the town beyond the castle, rumors seep downward like rain through stone. The villagers whisper of a king struck ill, of a mistress who may be more sorceress than woman. Some cross themselves at her name. Others retell the story with hungry fascination, embellishing the details, her beauty, her cruelty, her poisoned kiss. It is in this way that scandal becomes legend. It's not through facts, but through repetition. Through the way one servant's whisper becomes another's certainty. Through the way a bishop's disapproval becomes a bard's ballad sung in smoky taverns. And so the concubine must tread carefully. At night, when the king drifts into uneasy slumber, she sits by the fire and listens to the castle breathe. She knows eyes are upon her watching, waiting, hoping for her downfall. She knows that the queen's ladies sharpen their tongues like knives. She knows the bishop watches her too long when she passes, as if searching for a devil's mark upon her skin. But she also knows that the king cannot live without her. And in this knowledge, there is power. Power was not easily granted to women in the medieval world. A wife might wield some influence through lineage, through dowry, through children, but a concubine, a mistress, a prostitute, elevated above her station, she had only her wits, her body, and her ability to make herself unforgettable. Many such women perished when favor shifted. Some were cast aside, sent to convents, their names erased. Others were quietly executed, accused of witchcraft or treachery, but some became legends. Agnes Sorel in France, though she died young, was remembered as the Lady of Beauty, beloved by the king and feared by his rivals. Catherine Swynford in England, once the mistress of John of Gaunt, eventually married him, her children legitimized, founding a line that would shape history. Even women whispered to be common prostitutes sometimes rose to unexpected prominence, their names etched faintly in scandalous chronicles. Our concubine knows these stories. Perhaps she has heard them from traveling merchants, or in the hushed gossip of noble women who pretend disdain but secretly admire. She knows that survival is not only about beauty, but about cunning. And so, when she leans over the king and kisses him softly, when her lips graze his cheek or his neck, she does not think only of the poison that seeps quietly into him. She thinks of the story she is writing, story of power, won not by crown or sword, but by desire. Outside, the seasons shift. The winds grow colder, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and wood smoke. The castle's banners ripple against the gray sky, their colors muted in the chill. The harvest has been gathered, the villagers retreating into their homes as the nights grow long. And within the king's chamber, the nights are longer still. The concubine whispers stories to him, soft tales of lovers separated by fate, of queens who triumphed through cunning, of knights who betrayed their vows for passion. Her voice is low, each word like a thread pulling him deeper into her world. He closes his eyes, listening, and though his body weakens, his heart binds tighter to hers. She is his mistress, his poison, his salvation. And all the while the court waits. They see the king falter, they see the concubine flourish, and they wonder, how long can this last? How long before whispers become accusations, before scandal becomes trial, before a kiss becomes a confession? Yet tonight, none of that matters. Tonight there is only the fire, the hush of the wind against the shutters, and the concubine's voice. Her story, her scandal, her kiss. And as the firelight dances across the stone walls, as the king's breathing slows into uneasy rest, she closes her eyes, too knowing that tomorrow will bring new dangers, new whispers. But for now, there is only silence. A silence filled with the weight of history, the softness of silk, the lingering sweetness of a poisoned kiss. The corridors of the castle grow colder. Yes. Not simply from the changing season, but from something less visibly in unease that seeps through the walls like damp. Where once the servants bustled freely, laughter slipping between chores, now their steps are quieter. Their eyes drop when the concubine passes. Their voices hush when she lingers too long. It is no longer just rumor. It is fear. The king, pale and restless, rarely emerges from his chamber. His appetite for food dwindles, even as his appetite for her presence remains insatiable. The once mighty ruler who commanded armies now leans on her arms simply to cross a room. His weakness is no secret, though the reasons behind it remain cloaked in whispered speculation. And it is in whispers that rebellion is born. At night, the queen prays longer in her private chapel. The flickering candlelight casts shadows across her face, hardening her features into something more dangerous than piety. She has been humiliated before her husband's mistresses paraded openly, her crown overshadowed by scandal. But never like this, never so openly, never with such peril to the kingdom itself. For a king may sin, yes, but a king who cannot rise from his bed, that is not sin, that is weakness, and weakness invites ruin. One evening, when the fire sputters low in the great hall, the queen gathers her closest allies. A bishop with stern eyes, noble lord with ambitions he barely conceals. A physician whose loyalty tilts toward whoever offers the most coin. The conversation is careful, veiled in half-spoken phrases and meaningful glances. Yet the meaning is clear. The concubine has gone too far. She drains him, murmurs the bishop, voice heavy with righteous judgment. Not just his body, but his soul. She makes him unfit to rule, says the Lord, fingers drumming on the table. If he cannot stand, if he cannot fight, the kingdom is at risk. The queen listens in silence. She does not need to speak. The very tilt of her head, the calm steadiness of her eyes tells them what they wish to know. Yes, she agrees. Yes, action must be taken. Meanwhile, in the king's chamber, the concubine senses the shift. She sees it in the way the servants avoid her gaze, in the way platters of food are delivered more reluctantly, in the way the air itself seems thick with watchfulness. She knows she is surrounded not just by stone walls, but by suspicion. And yet she does not falter. When the king stirs in his bed, groaning softly, she leans close, her lips brushing his ear as she whispers, "You are strong with me, only with me." When he shivers, she draws the furs tighter, pressing her body against his, her warmth sinking into his skin. When he fears death, she kisses him slowly, lingeringly, until the fear ebbs away, replaced by the drowsy comfort of her presence. Poison, or love perhaps by now, even she cannot say which it is. For is not passion itself a kind of poison? Slow, irresistible, consuming? Outside, the autumn storms roll across the land. Rain lashes against the castle windows, and the moat swells with dark water. The nights lengthen, each one colder, each one filled with the muttered schemes of courtiers who feel history shifting beneath their feet. The scandal has ripened. In the village below, they no longer whisper in fear, but in certainty. The king is bewitched. The mistress is cursed. The devil's handmaiden walks in the royal bedchamber. Fireside tales spread faster than truth. Serving boy swears he saw her slip a vial into her gown. A washerwoman insists she found herbs in her chamber, herbs no good Christian woman should possess. Even the children begin to chant rhymes about the concubine's kiss, their innocent voices carrying the venom of rumor. But within the walls, she still reigned softly, silently, sweetly. The king's hand trembles when he reaches for hers, yet he clings as though she were his last tether to life. Sunken and weary, brighten only when she enters the room. "Do not leave me," he whispers, voice cracked like old parchment. "I will never leave you," she answers, smoothing his hair with fingers gentle as silk. And in that moment, it is not poison but devotion that binds them. It's twisted, dangerous, scandalous but real. Yet power built on desire is fragile. The queen waits. The bishop prays. The noble plots. The physician prepares his remedies, his vials lined neatly in a wooden chest. And beyond the walls, the people hunger for an ending, whether by justice or by blood. One cannot hold such scandal forever. The fire in the hearth crackles low. The wind moans softly in the shutters. And somewhere in the dark, footsteps echo in the corridor. Footsteps drawing nearer. Something is coming. A reckoning. A soft pause. The storyteller's voice lowers, inviting the listener to breathe deeper, to sink further into the cushions or bed. The scandal may rise in drama, but your body can drift in the opposite direction. Toward calm, toward stillness, toward rest. The castle wakes to a gray dawn. Fog clings to the stones, wrapping the towers in a shroud of secrecy. The courtyard lies hushed, not with peace, but with the weight of expectation. Something is about to happen. Every servant feels it in the marrow of their bones, though none dare say it aloud. In the royal chamber, the king stirs weakly, his breath shallow, his skin waxen. Once he rose before sunrise to hunt, to command, to thunder orders that shook the rafters. Now he cannot rise without help. His voice, when it comes, is little more than a whisper. But beside him, always sits the concubine. Her hand rests on his, tender, steady, possessive. Her gaze remains sharp, even as his grows clouded. She has not lost her strength, no. It has only deepened. For the weaker he becomes, the stronger her hold grows. And yet she feels it, the shift in the air. The change in the way people bow or fail to bow when she passes. The silence when she enters a hall where once there were murmurs of flattery. She knows the queen plots. She knows the bishop prays against her. She knows the noble and the physician whisper behind tapestries. But what is power if not tested? One evening, the queen makes her move. A feast is declared. A modest one, nothing like the great banquets of summer. The excuse is the king's health better, to keep it small, quiet, restrained. But everyone knows the truth. This is no celebration. This is a trial masked as supper. The hall glows with torchlight. Shadows flicker across the stone, dancing like specters of old sins. The courtiers file in, their voices low, their laughter forced. The concubine enters last, her gown a deep crimson, a color too bold, too scandalous for such a restrained occasion. She chooses it deliberately. Let them see. Let them talk. The queen greets her with a smile that does not reach her eyes. "My lady," she says, voice smooth as glass, "we are honored by your presence." The concubine inclines her head. "The honor is mine, your grace." They sit. Psst. Platters are brought forth, roasted pheasant, honeyed figs, bread warm from the ovens. But all eyes watch the king, slumped in his chair, his fingers barely lifting a morsel to his lips. When he does eat, it is from her hand, the concubine feeding him gently as though he were a child. Gasps ripple through the hall. It is too much. It's too open, too shameless. The bishop cannot contain himself. He leans forward, voice low but sharp. "Sire, do you not see what she does? Waste thrives?" The concubine's eyes flick. Toward him cool, "Unbothered, your excellency," she murmurs. "Do you question the king's choices? His majesty eats only what pleases him." Eats the bishop snaps from your hand. Like a lamb led to slaughter. The hall falls silent. The queen watches, calm, almost serene. She does not speak. She does not need to. Every word of accusation serves her purpose. The king tries to respond, his voice breaking into a cough. But the concubine hushes him, pressing a kiss to his temple. "Rest, my love. Do not strain yourself." The gesture is tender, intimate, and damning. Whispers ignite around the hall like sparks on dry straw. Mistress, poisoner, witch, temptress, prostitute, devil's concubine. Queen rises slowly, her gown pooling at her feet like liquid darkness. "My husband," she says softly, her voice carrying to every corner, "is unwell. And yet in his weakness, he is never without her. Is it not strange? As his strength fades, hers grows brighter, that as his breath falters, her cheeks bloom with color?" The noble lord speaks next, slamming his cup on the table. "It is not strange, my queen. It is unnatural." The physician clears his throat, eyes flicking nervously toward the concubine. "There are substances, herbs, that can weaken the body, slow the blood, still the breath. I have seen such effects before. The hall is a cauldron now, bubbling with accusation, thick with scandal. All eyes turn to her. And still, she does not falter. She leans back in her chair, the faintest smile curving her lips. "Perhaps," she says softly, "it is simply that he loves me. And love, as you all know, can undo even the strongest of men." A hush. The boldness of her words, the scandal of them, burns hotter than any denial could have. She has not defended herself. She has flaunted her power as though daring them to strip it away. The queen's eyes narrow. King groans weakly, reaching for her hand, his fingers trembling. And in that moment she feels it again, that mix of triumph and dread. For the tighter she holds him, the more the world conspires to pry him away. The feast ends in silence. Plates are cleared untouched, torches sputter low. And in the shadows of the hall, alliances harden. It will not be long now. The reckoning is close. But the concubine knows one truth. If they mean to destroy her, they must do so while the king yet breathes. For when his final breath escapes, Her scandalous kiss may yet linger in history far longer than his crown. The days that follow the feast are heavy with unease. The castle walls, once echoing with laughter and music, now carry only whispers. Servants walk with lowered eyes, courtiers drift like shadows, and in every corridor there seems to lurk the rustle of robes or the scrape of quills upon parchment, secrets being written, plots being sealed. The queen wastes no time. In her private chamber, surrounded by her ladies and trusted allies, she convenes what she calls a council of virtue. The bishop presides, his hands clasped over a jeweled cross, his voice trembling with fervor. The physician sits nearby, his scrolls unfurled. Diagrams of the human body marked with inks that hint at slow poisons and deadly tinctures. The noble lord, ever brash, pounds the table with his fist, demanding action. "My queen," he growls, "if we wait longer, there will be no kingdom left to save. The king is dying before our very eyes. And yet this harlot, this prostitute cloaked in silk sits at his bedside and feeds him his death by the spoonful. Cast her out now, before it is too late." The bishop nods solemnly. There is talk in the town. Ready the people whisper of witchcraft. They say she has bewitched him with her poisoned kiss, that she lies with him not only in flesh, but in soul, that she drains his life to feed her beauty. Such scandals travel quickly, my queen. If we do not act, your crown will be stained by her sin. The physician clears his throat, hesitant but compelled. There are herbs, indeed, that could produce such wasting. Belladonna, foxglove, powdered mercury, slow, subtle, not enough to kill at once, but to weaken, to drain. If these were slipped into his wine, or into the honey upon his figs— He pauses, shifting nervously under the queen's gaze. It would appear as illness, not murder. The queen's face remains serene, her hands folded neatly upon her lap. But her eyes, dark and steady, reveal the steel beneath. "She must be tested," she says softly. "We cannot accuse without proof. To strike too soon is to risk her triumph. But to wait too long," she lets the thought hang, unfinished, heavy as lead. And so the trap is set. The very next day the concubine is summoned to the queen's chamber. She enters with quiet poise, her crimson gown replaced by pale silk that clings like mist. She bows, but only just enough to show courtesy without submission. Her eyes sweep the chamber, taking in the bishop, the physician, the noble lord, all waiting like wolves around a snare. "My queen," she says softly, "you called for me." The queen gestures gracefully. "Indeed. Sit, child. You are ever at his majesty's side, and so we worry for you as well. His sickness lingers. Surely you feel it too." The concubine lowers herself onto the cushioned chair, her movements slow, deliberate. "I feel only his love," she replies, her voice calm. "His sickness grieves me, but his heart still beats for me, and that gives me strength." The bishop leans forward, eyes narrowed. "And yet your strength seems to grow as his fades. Tell us, mistress, what prayers do you whisper into his ear at night? Do you call upon God, or upon darker forces?" Her lips curve into the faintest smile. "Is love not prayer enough? Must affection be exercised?" The room stiffens. The physician clears his throat, his scrolls trembling in his hands. "We must know what food and drink you give him, what herbs you use to soothe him, for healing, of course." She tilts her head, feigning thoughtfulness. "Honey, figs, spiced wine, he craves them, and I provide. A sprig of valerian, sometimes, to calm his nerves. Surely you know these things, physician. You have prescribed them yourself." The noble lord slams his palm upon the table. "Enough. You mock us with clever words, but we are not blind. The people already name you poisoner. Concubine, mistress, prostitute, you hide behind silks and kisses, but your scandal will be your ruin. Confess, and perhaps the queen will show mercy." The concubine's eyes flash, just for a heartbeat. But then she laughs softly, a sound like silk tearing in the dark. "Confess?" she whispers. "And what would you have me confess, my lord?" "That the king chose me over others. He finds comfort in my arms, not in the cold bed of duty. That he drinks from my lips more eagerly than from the chalice of your church." The bishop gasps, his face blanching. The queen's ladies-in-waiting cover their mouths, eyes wide, scandal blossoming like fire. The queen herself does not move. Her serenity remains, but now there is a gleam of danger in her gaze. "You play a dangerous game," she says softly. "Every word you speak digs you deeper. Do you not fear for your soul?" The concubine leans forward, her voice dropping to a whisper, intimate yet carrying across the room. "My queen, I fear only obscurity. History forgets the dutiful wife. It remembers the mistress, the concubine, the scandal." A silence follows, heavy and electric. And in that silence, a decision forms. The queen's hand tightens on her rosary. The bishop murmurs a prayer under his breath. The noble lord clenches his jaw. It is clear now this woman will not break. She will not confess. She will not bow. And so, if she cannot be unmasked by words, she must be destroyed by deeds. That night, while the king lies restless in his chamber, the queen's allies move. Servants are bribed, cupbearers are questioned. Chambers are searched for hidden files and powders. Every corner of the castle is turned over in secret, while torches gutter low and owls call from the battlements. And though nothing is found, the whispers grow louder. Scandal no longer creeps, it roars. For in the mind of the people, proof is not needed, it's only suspicion. Only the delicious thrill of imagining a king undone by the lips of his concubine. A kingdom trembling at the scandal of her poisoned kiss. The morning bells toll, low and resonant, echoing through the stone halls. The castle feels different now, as though its walls themselves lean in to listen. The scandal that once whispered in corners now runs like wildfire through the very mortar. The king's decline is no longer a rumor, it is visible, undeniable. His face has grown pale, his body wasted, his once booming voice reduced to a rasp that even servants struggle to hear. The queen watches from her place beside the throne, every prayer upon her lips, every jewel upon her gown, a shield of duty. And always, beside him, sits the concubine, her pale silk gown brushing against his sleeve. Her slender fingers feeding him morsels of figs, drops of honeyed wine. It is intolerable. And so the queen acts. On the third day after their council, an edict is issued in the king's name. Though all know whose hand guided it, the concubine is to be removed from the royal chambers and placed under watch, until her influence upon his majesty can be determined harmless. The words are carefully chosen, measured, wrapped in politeness. But the meaning is clear. She is being accused without accusation, judged without trial. When the herald reads it aloud in the great hall, the courtiers erupt into murmurs, while some nod approvingly, crossing themselves. Others exchange glances, hungry for spectacle. The scandal they have feasted upon is now ripening into public spectacle. The concubine does not resist when guards arrive at her chamber. She rises with grace, smoothing her gown, gathering only a single veil. Her eyes are calm, her lips curved faintly upward, as though she knew this moment was coming. As they lead her through the halls, courtiers press forward, whispering, gasping, pointing. There she is, the poisoner. Look at her, still smiling. Concubine, mistress, prostitute or end, will be a lesson. But she does not falter. She walks as though the stones beneath her feet were petals, as though every gaze upon her were but fuel for her legend. The guards place her in a tower chamber, not a dungeon, not yet. The queen is too clever for that. To cage her like a common criminal would risk sympathy. Instead, she is cloistered in silk and shadow, her windows barred, her movements watched, but her dignity left intact. It is a gilded prison. The bishop visits her first. He enters with a heavy cross, his robes trailing, his voice grave. "Child," he intones, "confess your sins. Speak the truth now, while God's mercy still lingers." The king withers. "Your kisses are poison. Your scandal spreads like fire. Do you not tremble for your soul?" She rises slowly, approaching him with measured steps. Her veil slips back, revealing eyes bright as embers. "My lord bishop," she whispers, "I tremble only for a world where love is named sin and duty is worshipped above passion. If my kisses are poison, then they are no more than what the king begged for." Night after night, the bishop staggers, clutching his cross as though it alone shields him. He retreats, muttering prayers, shaken by her composure. The physician comes next, carrying vials and scrolls. He begs to examine her hands, her lips, her breath, searching for traces of tinctures or powders. She laughs softly, offering her wrists, her hair, even leaning close so he may breathe her scent. "What do you smell, physician?" she asks. "Jasmine, rosewater, the poison you wish to find." The poor man flees in shame, for he has found nothing. The noble lord comes last, does not waste time with prayers or science. He slams the door shut, stands before her, and spits his accusation like venom. "You will hang for this whore, mistress, concubine. The queen will see you burn, and I will watch with joy." Her smile fades then, just slightly. Her eyes sharpen, cold as steel. "You may watch, my lord," she whispers. "But remember, when I burn, so too does your king, for he will not let me go alone. He would rather perish in scandal than live in your chains." The noble lord recoils, for in his heart he knows she speaks truth. Days turn into nights. The king grows weaker. His pleas for her reach the queen's ears, but she remains resolute. Better his grief than his death, she tells herself, though in the silence of her chapel, she wonders if her resolve is born of duty or jealousy. The concubine, meanwhile, grows only more mysterious. From her tower window, she sings soft songs, lilting melodies that drift over the courtyard. Servants pause in their work to listen. Even guards soften as her voice threads through the air. The songs carry scandal in their notes, tales of lovers betrayed, of mistresses triumphant, of kings undone by a single kiss. The people talk of her more than ever. They name her dangerous, wicked, but also alluring, unforgettable. The queen's plan to silence her has only sharpened her legend. And then one night, as the wind howls around the towers and torches gutter low, a plot is woven in shadow. The noble lord demands her execution. The bishop insists upon confession. The physician, weary and frightened, suggests a trial by ordeal, test of God's judgment. But the queen is silent. She alone knows the truth, that the concubine cannot be broken by chains or prayers. She must be undone by scandal itself. And so she conceives a trap. The king will be told that his beloved is dying, that her imprisonment has broken her spirit, that she wastes away as he does. His love, frantic and fevered, will drive him to summon her, demand her release, and when she returns to his chamber, the queen's spies will be waiting, watching. If she poisons him, they will see it. If she seduces him, they will hear it. If she whispers her scandal, they will catch it. And if she does nothing, then suspicion alone will devour her, for the court will not be satisfied until her name is ashes. The concubine's poisoned kiss has become more than rumor now. It is destiny, inevitable, closing in like the tolling of the bells. The king's chamber is heavy with the scent of incense, a desperate attempt to mask the odor of sickness that clings to him. Skin is waxen, his body frail, yet his eyes burn, restless and fevered, whenever her name is spoken. "Bring her to me," he rasps, voice cracking with need. "My concubine, my mistress, my life." The courtiers hesitate, glancing to the queen. She stands rigid, veil drawn across her face to hide the storm in her eyes. She dares not refuse outright. His will still carries weight, even now, but her silence speaks volumes. "My lord," whispers the bishop, leaning close, "your strength wanes. You must think of your soul, of eternity. Cast her aside before it is too late. Confess, repent." Confess. The king snarls, his sudden rage startling even in his weakened state. Confess for what? For love? For passion? She alone gives me life. Without her, I am already dead. His fist slams the arm of the throne, and the hall falls silent. The queen bows her head. She knows the game is lost, lest she allows it to play to its end. And so, after a pause heavy with unspoken calculation, she nods. "Bring her," she says softly. "Let her comfort him. If her love is true, it will heal him. If it is poison." She leaves the sentence unfinished, but all hear the threat within. That night, under torchlight, the concubine is led back through the halls. Her veil trails behind her like mist, her hands bound with silk cords not to restrain her, but to remind her of the queen's dominance. The courtiers gather in shadows, watching. Some pray, some sneer, some tremble with anticipation. For all know that what is about to unfold will decide not only her fate, perhaps the kingdom's. She is brought to the king's chamber. The air is thick, warm with the crackle of the hearth, heavy with perfumes chosen to disguise the odor of sickness. The king, lying upon cushions, rises weakly at the sight of her. Eyes brighten, his lips curve into a trembling smile. "My love," he whispers, "my mistress, my only joy." She falls to her knees beside him, her hands rising to cradle his face. For a moment, all else fades. The courtiers, the queen's spies hidden behind screens, the watchful bishop.
Ow.
There is only him and her. Her voice is soft, soothing. "I am here, my king, always." He leans toward her, trembling, desperate. "Kiss me," he begs. "Kiss me and make me whole." The courtiers stiffen. Hidden quills scratch upon parchment. Every eye is upon them, every breath held. The queen's plan is working. This kiss will decide everything. The concubine hesitates, just for a moment. She knows the danger. She knows that lips upon lips tonight could be her ruin. Yet she also knows that to refuse would be to lose him forever. Slowly, deliberately, she bends her head. Her lips brush his, soft, lingering, tender. The king exhales a shuddering sigh, as though the very breath of life has been restored to him. He clutches her to him, desperate, insistent, whispering words half prayer, half plea. But the courtiers see only what they came to see. A kiss, a scandal. Proof enough, two minds already poisoned by suspicion. Witchcraft, hisses one. Poison, mutters another. "The king is undone," says the bishop, voice trembling. The queen remains silent, her eyes never leaving the pair. Hours pass. The concubine stays by his side, feeding him water, smoothing his fevered brow, whispering songs that soothe even his restless dreams. For the first time in weeks, he sleeps peacefully. And yet, by morning, his fever has worsened. God, the court erupts. The bishop declares it a sign of God's wrath. The physician claims the kiss has accelerated the sickness. The noble lord, hungry for vengeance, demands her arrest and execution. "The concubine has bewitched him," he roars. "Her poisoned kiss has doomed our king. She must die before the rot spreads further." Queen at last raises her hand. The hall falls silent. Her voice is cold, measured like the toll of a bell. She will stand trial, before God, before man, before all who doubt. Let the truth be laid bare. And if she is guilty, she pauses, her eyes locking with the concubines across the hall. Then she will burn. The words crash like thunder. The concubine does not bow her head. She does not weep, nor beg. Instead, She lifts her chin, her eyes gleaming like firelight upon polished steel. "Then let them watch," she whispers. "Let them all watch. And when they see me burn, let them ask themselves, was it passion that killed the king, or was it their envy?" Her voice lingers, echoing in the silence. The trial of the concubine has begun. The great hall of the palace is transformed into a tribunal. Torches burn against the cold stone walls, their smoke curling upward like restless spirits. Nobles crowd the benches, merchants and priests stand pressed shoulder to shoulder, and servants crane their necks from the shadows. Everyone wants to witness the fall of the king's infamous mistress. The queen sits upon her throne, veiled in black silk, her posture rigid and regal. At her side, the bishop clutches his holy book as though it were a shield. The courtiers whisper among themselves, their voices rising and falling like the hiss of snakes. And there, at the center of it all, stands the concubine. Her wrists are bound, but her head is held high. Her gown, though simple compared to the finery of the court, clings to her like a second skin. And even in chains, she radiates an allure that unsettles the gathered crowd. "Bring forth the charges," the bishop commands, his voice echoing through the chamber. A clerk unrolls a scroll and begins to read. "Accused of witchcraft, accused of seducing his majesty through forbidden arts, accused of poisoning his body with her kiss, accused of corrupting the morality of this court, and of leading his majesty into sin against God, the crown, and his queen." Each accusation is followed by murmurs, gasps, and the occasional hiss of condemnation. But the concubine does not flinch. Her eyes move across the crowd, cool, steady, almost mocking. The bishop turns to her. "You stand before God in this court. How do you answer?" Her lips curve in the faintest smile. "I answer as I always have. I loved him, nothing more. If love is poison, then let all who sit here beware their own lips, for none are innocent of it." The hall stirs. Some scoff. Others shift uncomfortably, for her words strike too close to the heart. Witnesses are called. Laddie-in-waiting claims she saw the concubine slip powders into the king's wine. Steward insists he heard her chanting in the dead of night. A physician testifies that her very touch brings fever. But with each accusation, the concubine meets their eyes and answers, calm, deliberate, to the lady. Perhaps it was sugar for his wine, not poison. "You mistake sweetness for sin." To the steward. "My only chant was a lullaby sung to soothe the king when his pain grew too great." To the physician, "If my touch brings fever, perhaps it is because the king's heart still beats for me." Her words are dangerous, provocative, scandalous, yet they weave a spell of their own, for even those who condemn her cannot look away. The queen, silent until now, finally rises. She glides forward, every step measured, her veil trailing like a shadow across the floor. When she speaks, her voice is low, steady, but each syllable carries the weight of power. "You claim love," she says, her eyes fixed upon the concubine. "But what kind of love destroys a kingdom? What kind of mistress whispers sweet lies into a sick man's ear, while his people starve, while his queen is cast aside, while his very soul is lost to sin?" The court holds its breath. The concubine lifts her chin. Kind of love that men have killed for since the dawn of time. The kind of love your poets praise in secret, though they call it scandal in public. He chose Minot for power, not for politics, but for passion. And you, my queen, could never forgive him for that. A ripple runs through the hall. Some gasp at her boldness. Others in the shadows cannot suppress a shiver of admiration. The queen does not falter. She leans closer, her voice now sharp as a blade. "You mistake lust for love. You mistake corruption for devotion. You mistake your place. You were never his queen, and you never will be. Tonight, the court will see you for what you are. A prostitute cloaked in silk. A temptress who poisoned her king." Her words hang in the air, heavy and damning. The trial grows darker. The bishop declares that the king's illness is proof of her guilt. The courtiers, emboldened by the queen, add every rumor they can remember, that she bathed in strange oils, that she wore charms against the cross, that she lured noble sons into her bed. One whispers, she bewitched the king with her kiss. Another mutters, her lips are death. The hall becomes a storm of scandal, accusation, lust, and envy all tangled together. And yet, in the midst of it, the concubine stands tall, her voice like a steady flame. You may call me concubine, mistress, even whore, if it pleases you. But know this, I gave him joy when none of you could. I gave him warmth when your piety froze him. I gave him love, not politics, not duty, not bargains, struck in dark chambers. If that is a crime, then perhaps your God condemns all who have ever loved too much. The words fall like stones into still water. Ripples spread, unsettling the silence that follows. The queen's veil hides her expression, but her hands clench at her sides. The bishop slams his book closed. Enough. The verdict is clear. Tomorrow at dawn she shall be executed. Let her death cleanse the sin from this kingdom. Gasps rise, whispers swirl, but none dare speak against it. The concubine does not beg, she does not cry. She only smiles faintly, as though she had expected nothing less. Then let it be dawn, she whispers, and let the world see whether it is love or envy that burns me. The torches sputter, their flames bending in the draught of the hall. The trial is over, the sentence is death. And still the scandal grows. The dungeon beneath the palace is damp and cold, carved from stone that has swallowed centuries of sorrow. Chains clink in the distance, rats scurry unseen, and the faint drip of water marks time more faithfully than any clock. Here, in a narrow cell lit only by a single torch, the concubine spends her final night. The guards had expected her to weep, to beg, to curse the queen's name or claw at her fate. Instead, she reclines against the wall with an eerie calm, her dark hair spilling like silk over her shoulders, her bound wrists resting gently in her lap. She looks less like a prisoner than a queen on her throne, one whose crown has simply been stolen. Outside her cell, the guards whisper, "She bewitched him," one mutters, not daring to step closer. "I heard she fed him poisons made from her own lips," says another. A third shakes his head. "No, I heard he begged for her kiss, even as it burned him." What kind of love is that, to crave the thing that destroys you? The concubine hears every word, and a smile curls at the corner of her mouth. Even in chains, even on the eve of death, she is the center of scandal, the subject of desire. Hours pass. The torch flickers. The dungeon grows colder. At last the heavy door creaks open. A visitor enters, not the queen, not the bishop, but a young noble, scarcely more than a boy. His cloak is pulled tight around him, and his eyes dart nervously to the guards before settling on her. He bows low, trembling. "My lady, I had to see you. I had to know if the stories were true." She tilts her head, studying him like a cat watching a mouse. "Which stories, boy?" "There are so many that you could make a man forget his vows with a glance. That your kiss was fire and sweetness both. That even now, condemned you are, irresistible." His words falter as though speaking them aloud makes him guilty of treason. The concubine rises slowly, the chains at her ankles rattling softly against the stone. She steps toward him, and though the iron bars separate them, he flinches back as if she might slip through and touch him. "Do you believe in such things?" she whispers. Her voice is low, hypnotic, carrying the softness of silk and the weight of sin. That lips can be poison, that love can kill. The boy swallows hard. His face pales, but his eyes do not leave hers. "I don't know what I believe, only that I wanted to see you before dawn." She leans closer, her breath brushing the iron between them. "Then look well, sweet boy, for Tomorrow the world will see my death. And yet long after my body is ash, they will still whisper of me. They will still crave the kiss that was denied them. The boy trembles. He cannot answer. He turns and flees, leaving only the echo of her voice in the dark. Alone again, the concubine sinks to the floor of her cell. For the first time, her composure softens. Her hands press to her lips, the lips that brought her to this end. She remembers the king, his fevered breath against her cheek, his whispered promises, promises made not to a queen, not to a noblewoman, but to her a mistress, a concubine, one who should have been powerless. She remembers how he would say, "Yours is the only truth I know." And now that truth has been condemned as poison. Midnight. The dungeon is quiet. But in her mind, the concubine hears the murmur of the court above, the courtiers trading gossip, the priests whispering prayers, the queen rehearsing her victory, and yet she smiles. For she knows something they do not. Scandal does not die with the body. It lingers, seeps into the stones, slips through the cracks of history. Long after the queen is forgotten, long after the bishop's sermons have turned to dust, men and women alike will still speak of her, the concubine, the mistress, the poison that tasted like love. She shifts against the wall, closing her eyes. Tomorrow, she whispers to herself, they will burn me for lust, for scandal, for sins they secretly dream of themselves. But tonight, I am still his. Tonight, I remember his kiss. Her breath slows, softens, deepens in almost hypnotic rhythm. Outside, the guards listen. One leans closer, shaking his head. Even now, she's bewitching herself to sleep. The other mutters, "No, she's bewitching us." They step back, unnerved, for her calm is more terrifying than screams would have been. The concubine sleeps at last, but in her sleep she dreams. She dreams of silken sheets and the king's arms around her. She dreams of forbidden laughter echoing in the royal bedchamber. She dreams of feasts where all eyes envied her, of nights where the world shrank to nothing but the press of his lips against hers. And in that dream, she is no prisoner. She is no whore. She is queen of his heart. Her dream is sweeter than any life the court could ever grant her. Above the bells toll. It is the hour before dawn. Her last night is nearly over. The executioner sharpens his blade. The bishop prepares his sermon. The queen dresses in black, not for mourning, but for triumph. And still in her cell, the concubine sleeps with a smile upon her lips. The smile of a woman who knows that tomorrow, though her body will perish, her scandal will live forever. The first light of dawn creeps into the city like a pale ghost, brushing its fingers over the spires of the cathedral and the jagged rooftops of the palace. The streets are already awake. Merchants who would normally be arranging their stalls now cluster together in hushed excitement. Housewives with baskets abandon their chores to gossip at the well. Even the beggars shuffle closer to the square, for today is no ordinary day. Today, the king's concubine, his most infamous mistress, the woman whispered about in every chamber and alleyways to be executed. It is not justice they come to witness. It is scandal made flesh. In the queen's chambers, preparations are underway. She sits before a polished mirror of Venetian glass, her ladies in waiting, fastening the dark gown that clings to her frame, not morning black, but victory black raven silk that swallows the morning light. A delicate crown rests upon her brow, sharp as daggers, gleaming cold against her pale skin. Her lips curl in satisfaction. For years, she had endured humiliation, her husband flaunting a prostitute in silks as though she were a queen. For years, she had watched courtiers bow to the mistress's beauty, even as they whispered behind her back. But no more. The queen rises, every movement regal, her eyes glittering with triumph. Today she would reclaim her throne, not only in the court, but in the hearts of the people. Let her kiss the crowd with her poison, she murmurs to her reflection. They will see what becomes of a whore who dares to play queen. In the dungeon below, the concubine awakens to the sound of footsteps. Her wrists ache where iron bites into them, her ankles stiff from the cold. But when the guard enters with chains, she lifts her chin, serene as a saint. Time, she asks softly. The guard nods. He avoids her gaze, though a flicker of unease passes his eyes. They had seen prisoners scream, beg, curse God in the hours before death. But she, this mistress, this so-called harlot, looks as though she is preparing for a feast. Chains are fastened. She stands. Her beauty is undiminished, even here. Eyes sharp with defiance, lips curved in that same secret smile. Her gown, simple white linen for execution, falls over her figure like purity mocked by scandal. She steps forward, and the guard's rough men, hardened by years of blood, hesitate before leading her up. It is as though she commands them, even in chains. The courtyard outside the palace is filled with people. From the highest noble to the lowest beggar, they press forward, eager for a glimpse of the fallen mistress. Mothers clutch their children close, whispering cautionary tales of lust and ruin. Young men strain their necks, hoping to see the infamous lips that had undone a king. The execution scaffold rises above them all, stark against the pale dawn sky. And there, upon the platform, stands the bishop, his robes heavy with embroidered gold. His hands clutch the holy book, his face grim with the satisfaction of righteousness. Today he proclaims to the crowd, "You will witness the wages of sin, a harlot who dared to spread her poison in the house of God and the bed of a king. She tempted with lust, she corrupted with scandal, she destroyed with her kiss. But now the Lord's judgment falls upon her." The crowd murmurs, hungry for the spectacle. Then the concubine appears. Led by guards, she walks with a grace that silences the square. Each step echoes against the cobblestones, steady, unbroken. Her head is high, her gaze calm, her chains clinking softly like jewelry rather than shackles. For a moment, even the bishop falters, for she does not look like a criminal, nor like a whore. She looks like a queen robbed of her crown. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Some spit curses, others whisper prayers, but many to many watch with awe. The queen, watching from her balcony above, grips the railing tighter. Even now, the concubine steals the people's eyes. At the base of the scaffold, the guards pause. The bishop motions for her to kneel, but she does not. Instead, she turns to the crowd. Her voice, soft yet clear, floats over the square. "Oh, you've heard their tales," she says. "That I was a mistress, a concubine, a temptress. That my kiss was poison, my love a crime. But know this," she leans forward, her words sharp as a blade wrapped in velvet. "Every whisper they condemned me for, every scandal they spread was born not from sin, but from envy." The crowd stirs. A noble mutters to another. A washerwoman crosses herself. A young man shudders, caught between shame and fascination. The bishop raises his hand, shouting, "Silence her." But the concubine only smiles. "You may kill me," she continues, "but you will not kill the memory of me. Long after this queen is dust, long after these priests are forgotten, you will still whisper of the kiss that felled a king." Gasps erupt. Some jeer, some cheer. The crowd is divided, scandal slicing them apart like a blade. The queen's knuckles whiten on the balcony. The bishop's voice shakes with fury. "Enough. Take her." The guards drag her up the steps. She does not resist. She kneels now at last, her head bent not in shame, but in mock prayer. The executioner steps forward, his axe gleaming in the morning light. The square holds its breath, but in that silence the concubine lifts her face, and she smiles. The same smile that once bewitched a king, the same smile that even now unsettles queens, bishops, and beggars alike. Her lips part, and though her final words are too soft for the crowd to hear, Those closest swear she whispered, "Remember me." The axe falls, the crowd roars. But in the hush that follows, even as her body is carried away, the murmurs begin anew. Did you see her smile? She looked like a queen. Her kiss, they say it still burns on his lips. And so the scandal lives on. Above, the queen closes her eyes, victorious at last. But deep in her heart, she knows the concubine has won something greater than survival. She has won immortality in whispers, in rumors, in scandal that no execution can kill. The concubine's poisoned kiss would live forever. The square slowly empties, though the echoes linger. Cobblestones once drenched with excitement now lie quiet. But the murmurs drift through the alleys, through the taverns, through the shuttered houses where candlelight still flickers. The concubine is gone. Yet she remains everywhere. A woman at the well whispers to her neighbor. She smiled as though she were blessed, not damned. A drunk soldier slams his cup down in the tavern. No queen could match her, not in life, not in death. And in the palace itself, even as the queen retires to her chambers with triumph glittering in her eyes, the maids exchange glances, their thoughts unsettled. For who can truly kill beauty? Who can silence scandal? This is how legends are born. It's not from truth alone, but from whispers. And so, my dear listener, as you let your breathing soften, do you feel the heaviness of your eyelids begin to deepen? Imagine the way such stories spread across centuries. The tale of a king undone, not by war, not by rebellion, but by a single kiss. The tale of a mistress who walked to her death with the grace of a queen. The tale of envy, scandal, and immortality carved not in marble, but in memory. Softly now, let the images drift across your mind. The torchlit corridors of the palace, fading into mist. The queen's crown, sharp as daggers, dissolving into shadow. The executioner's axe, no longer heavy, but distant, slipping into silence. All that remains is the smile that lingers in the twilight between waking and sleep. It's a smile that asks nothing of you but to remember. As you listen, you may feel yourself sinking into a calm state of reflection. It is not only a story of scandalit, it is a story of power, of the fragile threads that hold kingdoms together. Think of how often history remembers the forbidden. The kings may be listed in chronicles, the queens may be sculpted in stone. But it is the concubines, the mistresses, the courtesans, those who lived in scandal that capture imagination. They are the shadows behind the throne, the whispers in the night, the figures who linger when the grand halls are dust. And tonight, as you rest, you too are surrounded by whispers, not of gossip, but of comfort, not of judgment, but of peace. Let your breath move slowly now, in and out. Imagine yourself lying not in your bed, but in a chamber centuries ago. Tall stone walls cradle you in silence. A fire glows low in the hearth. Somewhere outside, the night watchman's footsteps fade into distance. You are safe. You are at peace. The scandal is only a story. The execution, only a dream fading into smoke. What remains is the softness of candlelight, the weight of blankets, the rhythm of your breath. The whispers of history drift further away, like waves pulling back to the sea. The queen's triumph, the bishop's fury, the crowd's shout Saul dissolve, and you are left with quiet, soft, deep, steady quiet. In that quiet there is a lesson. That no matter the scandal, no matter the rise or fall, no matter the cruelty of envy or the sharpness of power, time carries everything into silence. Even the loudest gossip becomes only a lullaby in the dark. Let that thought sink into you. Every worry you carried today, every sharp word, every moment of unrest, it too will dissolve. It too will be softened by time. Just as scandal became legend, your thoughts will become dreams. And dreams, gentle listener, are the true kingdom of rest. Now feel the weight of your body against where you lie. Your shoulders loosen. Your hands grow warm and heavy. Your breath slows to match the rhythm of a long-forgotten song. If your mind wanders, let it. If you drift into images of queens, concubines, palaces, and whispers, allow them to pass gently, like clouds across the moon. You do not need to hold on to them. They will carry you softly where you need to go. And so, the concubine's tale does not end. It becomes part of you tonight, lingering in the soft hush of imagination. Not a burden, it's not a scandal, but a story, a shadow, a gentle thread woven into the tapestry of your dreams. Her kiss, once poison, now becomes a lullaby. Smile, once scandal, now becomes a guide into sleep. Her memory, once dangerous, now becomes peaceful. Breathe deeply. Let the last fragments of the tale slip away. The palace fades. The crowd fades. The queen, the bishop, the executioner, all fade. Only you remain, resting, drifting safe. The whispers now are not of scandal, but of stillness. They carry you into a deeper, softer, quieter place, where sleep is waiting, where dreams are ready to take you. And as you drift there, remember, every story is a doorway. This one has led you to peace. Let the door close gently behind you, and step softly into slumber. And so, dear listener, the scandal of the concubine's poisoned kiss wound its way to its end. What began with beauty, desire, and secret whispers ended in betrayal, suspicion, and the axe's shadow. The young concubine, once adored as a rare jewel in the king's collection, became the cautionary tale of how passion and ambition could so quickly sour into danger. The legacy of this tale is not one of romance, but of power and its consequences. In medieval courts, whether in France, in England, in the Ottoman palaces, or in the Ming dynasty, harems, the role of mistress, concubine, or even prostitute, was never simple. They were not merely objects of pleasure. They were pawns in dynastic struggles, brokers of influence, sometimes even shadow rulers who shaped the fate of empires from behind veils and silken screens. But with influence came peril. Every glance, every favor, every kiss was weighed, measured, and judged. And one misappreal or imagined could spell ruin. Concubine in our tale is remembered not for her beauty, not for her talents, not for her secret songs sung in candlelit chambers, but for the scandal of a single kiss, a kiss that the court swore was poisoned, a kiss that toppled her from silk sheets to the cold stone of imprisonment, a kiss that etched her name into the chronicles of whispered history. What can we learn from her? That in courts ruled by desire and power, truth is rarely what matters most. Perception, rumor, and envy were sharper than any dagger. The king, so easily swayed by beauty, was just as easily turned by whispers of betrayal. The queen, so threatened by rivals, used the tools of fear and suspicion to secure her throne. The courtiers, hungry for favor, fanned the flames of gossip until there was no fire left to control. And the concubine, she became a symbol, reminder that women who rose too high too quickly could just as swiftly be cast down. Her story reflects a broader truth about medieval life, that the court was a theater, and in that theater, each person played a role: king, queen, mistress, prostitute, soldier, priest. The performance was everything. And the audience, those who whispered in corridors, those who recorded the chronicles, those who judged in silence, decided who would be remembered as virtuous and who would be remembered as scandalous. The concubine's poisoned kiss lingers in history not because it was proven true, but because it was too tempting to forget. Scandal always outlives silence. Rumor always outlives reason. And so, while queens and kings have long been buried, their thrones replaced, their crowns melted into new shapes, the tale of the concubine remains, a reminder of the fragility of power, a lesson in the dangers of desire, perhaps for some, a quiet warning that even the sweetest kiss may carry within it the seeds of ruin. Dear listener, what moral can we take as we close this story? Perhaps it is this: to see beyond appearances, to remember that beauty and charm can dazzle, but behind them may lie motives we cannot see. Perhaps it is this: to understand the cost of envy and how whispers can destroy lives with no need for swords. Or perhaps still, it is a reflection on power itself and how those without crowns must navigate the dangerous games of those who wear them, and how survival often depends not on virtue, but on caution. Whatever lesson you choose, remember that stories like these were not told merely for entertainment. In medieval times, such tales were warnings. They were repeated in taverns, in marketplaces, in quiet chambers lit by a single candle. They reminded men and women of the dangers of greed, lust, and pride. They reinforced the idea that fate was fickle and fortune could turn at any moment. And they survive today because they are not only about the past, they speak also to the present. For even now, in our modern world, how different are we from those courtiers who whispered and judged? How different are our scandals, our rumors, our betrayals? The stage has changed. The players are new, but the story, the hunger for desire, the fear of betrayal, the sting of scandal remains eternal. And so we close the tale of the concubine's poisoned kiss, a story of love twisted by suspicion, of beauty turned into danger, of ambition that ended not in triumph, but in tragedy. It is a tale that reminds us that history is not only shaped by battles and crowns, but also by whispers in the dark. So as you rest tonight, let the echoes of this story linger softly in your mind. Remember the palace halls, the flicker of torchlight, the silk curtains that hid forbidden meetings. Remember the concubine's laughter, the king's indulgence, the queen's cold gaze. Remember the scandal that spread like fire, consuming all in its path. And remember, too, the lesson that history belongs not to those who are innocent, but to those who are remembered. And tonight, dear listener, you have remembered her, the concubine, the kiss, the scandal, the fall. And in remembering, you carry her story forward. It's not as a warning, not as a judgment, but as part of the long, strange, provocative history of human desire and human downfall. A story that will live, whispered again and again, as long as there are those willing to listen. That is the end of the concubine's poisoned kiss.